Hello, honors class. How's everybody doing? I hope y'all are doing well. I'm fine, thank you. Let's see here, people. I want to talk today about the section of medieval women in our book. Um, I'll try not to talk here too long. I want to give y'all some questions to think about, and then I'll be looking forward to hearing what y'all have to say on Wednesday. Um, so, a couple of things here worth talking about. For one, as always, people, Tertullian. So I don't know how to pronounce these names. So the first thing that we read here was from Tertullian. Maybe that's right. The appearance of women. Uh, so he has all sorts of ideas about what women should do and about how women should act. Um, he mentions a couple of things that I wanted to say. One, he talks about the idea that women need to desire to be unattractive, and that their attractiveness being a temptation to men. Should be something that they should be trying to not do because they shouldn't want to be corrupting men. And I guess one of the things that I thought about here is the way that it continues in our society that women are often blamed for what men do. And for instance, in the way that they were dressed. Oh, well, you got raped. Well, you shouldn't have been dressed in this particular manner. Or if you dress in this particular manner, you should expect a typical type of behavior to come with that. That is still, I want to say, an issue in society. There are still, I want to say, a lot of people who would tell you that the problem in those situations, or at least one of the problems, is that women need to be more modest. So I wondered what y'all thought about that. Again, I think we can still see that idea in society. If you look at some other religions, I'm thinking of some conservative sects in all sorts of, whether it be Amish or whether it be Muslim or you name it. In a number of different sects, there is the idea that women should remain unattractive or should not be tempting men. Obviously, the burqa, covering your entire body except for your eyes. At any rate, to what degree are women blamed for these things? To what degree are they quote unquote responsible? Tertullian has them being completely responsible for all of men's sins. Um, Also, too, he talks about the idea that if a woman dresses attractively, um, the man is lost as soon as he desires your beauty. He has committed already in his mind what he desired and have become and you have become his sword. Okay, so you're slaying him down. The idea here is that even if the man doesn't take advantage of the woman, the idea that he even thinks about it for a second, that he commits a sin in his mind, is the same as a regular sin. So this is something that we may have talked about a little bit already in other cases. But right, Tertullian, one Christian tenet that is now that still is something that people talk about is this idea that if you commit a sin in your mind, it's as bad as actually committing it. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't buy this at all. I do not buy that killing somebody is the same as thinking about killing them. But if you're thinking in that line of thought, oh my God, you can imagine all of the potential problems that might come up, like the way people are dressed. I wondered how y'all thought about that, committing a sin in the mind being as bad as committing a real sin or not. Another thing that I thought was important here, both in Tertullian and in some of the other people that we read, is the way in which the Bible is used to justify their misogyny. Um, using Bible verses from Corinthians. They're using obviously all of them are making use of the story of Adam and Eve. And for instance, they say here, man was created first, woman was created to be his helpmate, which is true in one of the stories. In another story, right? Obviously, I think most of us, if you've had me before, we've talked about this, right? That in Genesis at the beginning, there are two creation stories. One where men and women are created at the same time. But you notice they don't talk about that one. They're only talking about the creation story where woman comes second. And the reason why I mention this is because if we use certain stories to justify certain behaviors, if people believe that if that's part of their religion, it's part of their religion that women are inferior. It's part of their religion to believe that woman caused the first sin, etc. If you believe that, if your religion is tied up with your misogyny, how are we ever going to get rid of the misogyny? So anyway, I wanted to point out the sort of use of the Bible both in well, both in the New and Old Testament, right? So they're very concerned about this idea. They're also very concerned about the idea that since we descended from Eve, Tertullian even says women are Eve. Don't you see that you are Eve? This likewise is important in terms of believing. If you believe the biblical story that Adam and Eve were the first humans and that all human life derived from them, which is what people at the time believed, then if that's what you think, then the rest of human history, those genes or that the stuff inside them is passed on. And so for hundreds of years, people thought, hey, we are all guilty of sin because we are all direct descendants of Adam and Eve. Well, I think we all know that that's not scientifically possible. I don't know what we do with that. I wanted to mention the trial of Joan of Arc a little bit. I want to first point out the similarities between Joan of Arc and Socrates and Jesus. All three of those are sent by God. All three of them warn that if you convict them despite everything, you are going to suffer. Obviously, Jesus, right? You're going to be outside of God's purview. And Socrates says, "Oh my God, your society's and the generations below me are even going to be worse. You get rid of me, you're going to regret it." And roughly, Joan of Arc says the same thing, right? The other thing that I think is interesting about all of them, or at least Socrates and Joan of Arc, is that they're hearing voices. And especially in Joan of Arc, she's hearing voices. Now, she believes that those come from God. And those voices are telling her that the French should triumph over the English. I feel like God probably is not concerned whether the French are triumphing over the English. So my point is I don't believe that the voices she heard actually came from God. I don't think they did, right? Or for that matter, I don't think they came from the devil either. I don't know where they came from, but I know in our society, if people talk about hearing voices, in general, that's perceived as being slightly crazy. But worth noting again that this is a very common idea, right? Sent by God, being spoken to directly to by God, right? And I guess also in those cases, right, like Socrates and Joan of Arc and Jesus here, we all have to take their word for it. We all got to take their word for it that they're hearing these voices and that they're accurately reporting what the voices have told them. I guess I'm thinking that if you're hearing voices, you're more likely insane than you are inspired by God or the devil. Another thing that I think was really interesting in the Joan of Arc stuff is one, the how concerned the court is with her wearing men's clothing, and so that makes me just think about how important gendered clothing is in our society, and how much people messing with those things freaks people out. Obviously, transgender people, but also, right, I want to say, you don't have to be transgender if you're a man and you're wearing something feminine. People might people might make judgments about you, etc. Um, and so, why do we care so much about the clothing? Why is it such an affront to them that she should wear men's clothing, or pretend to be a man? Why is that such an issue? And again, I would say, why is that such an issue in our society? You would think what people would wear would be roughly one of the least important things, and yet to them it's one of the most important things, and to a number of people in our society it seems as if it's a really important thing. The other thing that I wanted to mention, the last thing that I'm really going to mention, I think it's the last thing I'm really going to mention. Um, Joan of Arc says, I'm obeying God's law. And because I'm obeying what God tells me to do, I don't care about your laws. So your laws say that I'm not supposed to wear men's clothing, that I'm not supposed to be in war or whatever, do all these male activities. Um, that's what your law says. But Joan of Arc says, no, I'm following God's law. And God's law is more important than man's law. So I wondered what we think about that. On the one hand, that seems like a decent enough argument, right? I mean, people could make that argument here, right? That people have had to disobey laws to do the right thing, right? Like at one point in time, right, to help slaves, you had to be disobeying the law. Um, and obviously, I think in those situations, people would say, "Well, I don't care what the rule of the land is. What matters is what God wants. What matters is that we're doing God's will." Um, and so, but this creates problems, because what if you hear voices that tell you that God's will is to kill people? Which people hear all the time, right? And they go out and kill people. And then when they're in court and people ask them, they say, "Hey, I was told to do it. God told me to do it. A voice told me to do it." Um, so my question is it okay for us to just say, you know what, screw the regular laws, I'm following God's law? And and which we might also interpret as being our conscience or something like that. I'm not sure. Um, right? But why, or rather, do we want people obeying God's law over the laws of the land? And when is it okay to break those laws, and when is it not okay? Stuff to think about, people. I hope you all are well. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Everyone have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.